What we're going to actually see is the XLF. I think this is a really important chart for what's going on in the overall market right now. Uh, we are seeing overall, I would say, clear weakness occurring in the market as we're seeing an overall threat that is unknown, right? We don't know how long we are going to actually slow. And we're seeing it show up here in the XLF. XLF is having a sell-off on the intermediate term down to the 78.6 fib very early in that rising phase. That is a real issue here. And it says if we lose that level, which is right around 48.29, we have likely now seen the high for that overall cycle with a trough that's only due 616 right around 84. So um, what we will be watching for is a move back to the upside that actually fails here and then rolls back down. And I would say there are very high odds of moving through this low here at around, uh, you can see right there, and see it easily move through that level, I would say, So I would say a move like this seems like a higher odds play. Apologies, that arrow's a little bit funky. Like this looks like a higher odds play. So I'm going to be looking for a move up, but that move up has very high odds of actually failing on the downside. On the short term, there's a low that's due right about now. But the overall bias is down. So we will be watching for a low to form shortly, and then for that pop to then get sold again on the downside. You can see that next trough is due, look at that, right around mid-May, which is when we're looking for a low to form in the overall stock market. Let's pop over to the XLEs. XLEs are also in a bearish overall mode here. Trough is 255 around 630. This old trough is right around $83. Going to be looking for a sell-off down to that level. This is not a good chart here on the intermediate term. In terms of the short term, 313 to right around 327 is when that low is due. I am looking for this to fail right around this zone here, 87.50 around 89.58, and a sell-off down to 83.5 to 82.75 into that trough. Okay, so if we pop over now to the 2 hour, you can see what's going on the 2 hour. Everything down. So that is saying right now the highest odds would be that this would fail here and roll back down shortly on the 2 hour as well. Okay, so let's look there at actually pop over to a couple others. GDX was another one that was of interest. GDX has really been acting beautifully on the upside on the intermediate term. We have a 78.6 around 41.87. Trough that's due here around 512 to 721. So we'll be looking for just a bit higher here, then watch for this to get a curl back down. And then once this low forms, another move that likely moves through this old high at 44.22. Pop over to the short term. This one formed right on time. You can see right there. We turned up. We have a 78.6 fib at 41.74. And what we're looking for is to watch closely on the downside these two areas right here, being the 61.8 and the 78.6. If we lose those levels here, we would then be looking at a move like that back on the downside with our next trough due in the early part of April. Have a couple more here. Going to look at CEG. CEG has formed a super clear high now right there. We have now sold off. We have a low that's due 414 right on 6.9 and a 78.6 at 197.63. This old trough is at 190, I'm sorry, 155.60. So we'll be looking for a move down here. And the overall bias is clearly firmly pointed down. Pop over to the short term, 224 to right around 312 is when that low is due. 211 to 177.5 is when are our levels here on the downside, but the overall bias is still firmly down here in CEG and even on the 2 hour. Look at the bear signals coming out here in each of these areas, each of which led to some clean follow through. You can see a series of lower highs, lower lows, right on the downside, very, very clear in the 2 hour time frame in what has been just a huge move lower. And finally, I will look at TMO. Okay, this is an interesting one to me. I am looking for a move back up, but that move up is likely to make a lower high and then curl back down again into that trough, which is due 421 to right around 623. What are our levels on the upside? We will go ahead and draw those in for you. 549 to right on 561 is what I am going to be uh, seeing here as a higher odds play to the upside, and then look for that to curl back down again, as I said. If we hop over now to the short term trough is due right about now, but no obvious trough as of yet. We're going to be watching for this to curl its way back to the upside here and give you that sign that this is trying to form its low, just like what happened here. You can see that right there, how we formed that low, then had that move through that line right there to actually trigger that rally. So that's, this needs to do a little bit of a move like that to form um, that clear low, and then look for it to rally up to the upside into that 550 to 560-ish area. Okay, so that's look there in TMO on the daily. Pop over to the 2 hour. And really not seeing a whole lot here as of yet. So just really holding sideways, and as I said, needs a bit more work. And I'm going to go ahead and hand this off to you now, Katie.
All right, so this is a Zeekr Intelligent Technology. I have a note in here. I was working on this yesterday. The cycles are still being established. These bars right here are the sum total of all of the data that we have, since it's a relatively new symbol. But these cycles, if they are correct, are 14 bars in length. That's relatively short. So what we usually end up seeing is that these end up being like minor half cycles. But we still have a trough that did form here and a move up. You can see that the reversal scout has turned green, and we are backing off from these prior cycle peaks. So we have to see whether we can get through that area. If we can, then the next level up would be the 100% extension at 35 and a half. We have a timing window that's coming out in that May timeframe, May 12th to June 20th. If we switch over to the daily chart, you can see that this cycle that we're in has formed a higher high compared to that cycle and getting back up towards this prior cycle peak from a couple of cycles ago. And we will have to see if we can get up that way. And I would expect this to curl down into the timing window, which runs from 325 to 42. And then the next cycle, if it's going to be able to take out that high, that would be the time for it to do that, because the subsequent cycle will be the one where we will get this trough. Excuse me, we will get this synced intermediate and daily cycle trough. But overall, this is holding up very well despite all the market weakness. And the other symbol that I have is Regeneron Pharmaceuticals. This one, we have a intermediate cycle trough that likely formed several weeks ago here, and that was right on time in this timing window that was from January 13th to February 21st. This had quite a sell-off. So the resistance zone is very high up here. If it's going to be able to make it up back up there, which the bottom of which is 859.43, then it will probably be late in the cycle. We do have an upturn with momentum though, and this category in general has been doing well. Over on the daily chart, you can see that was that intermediate synced trough with the short-term trough. And then we formed a basing cycle here, ending higher than where it began after a series of negatively configured cycles, each of them ending lower. So we are going to project up to the $743.28, which is the high from back here, up to 769.50. That's the short-term 100% extension level. And this cycle isn't due to trough until the beginning of April. So overall, this looks quite well too. We've had an improvement in momentum with the reversal scout turning green, and the slim ribbon has improved to neutral.
Okay, so I'm going to take a little deeper dive in terms of the overall instruction here on this one. I find this one very interesting that a member requested, and I'm looking at a multiple time frame as we normally do grid here. And from left to right, we have our monthly, our weekly, our daily, and our 2 hour. And first things first, I want to say is that cycle analysis gives you this amazing framework to be able to think off of as a technical analyst. And then as you transition yourself from that technical analyst into that trade planning strategist, you just have so much clear detail then to work with in terms of that technical evidence. And I thought the monthly chart was important here to pull up because the member asked for basically an intermediate time frame and short-term outlook. So I'm going to focus in on the short term ultimately, but I wanted to start with the overall directional bias. And if we look at the multiple time frames here, so I'm starting on the left-hand side. This is our monthly cycle analysis, and this is the monthly chart. I have two momentum indicators on here. There's an exponential moving average 5 and the 13 up on the top, and then I have our reversal scout here on the bottom. You can see those are clearly positive, and you can see that we're into the peaking phase, late peaking phase of this cycle here in the monthly, and this cycle has been very positive. And unless there is a breakdown under this minor or this weekly cycle low support. So this is really important here, this weekly cycle low support, which comes around 437, 438, somewhere right around there. Then that would indicate that we could have seen that monthly peak coming in. So that's one to really keep an eye on, especially if we get that reversal scout to roll over in the weekly. But in terms of the overall directional bias, both the monthly and the weekly right now, you can tell by the configuration and the shape, these are and this is in a clear uptrend. Now I'm going to move over to the daily because we have some important information coming in on the daily chart and really just in this last 2-hour bar. So I'm going to focus in here now, and I'll come back to that intermediate in a second, but I'm going to expand these out a little bit here so we can see this a little clearer. So I'm looking at my daily chart, and I'm looking at my 2-hour chart. And what's important, this is an important teaching lesson that Slim has passed on to us that we think is really important, is how the shorter duration timeframes really impact that longer duration timeframes, and then vice versa. So the longer duration timeframes also impact the shorter duration, and I'll explain how that works right now. And interestingly enough, in this 2-hour bar, you can see that the Slim ribbon has shifted negative. So this is our 2-hour chart here with the reversal scout. And we call it that reversal scout because it's going to be more sensitive. So it's out front looking at the price action. You can see that this turned actually earlier. This was, I think, on Monday. We rolled over here on the 2-hour, and now just on the last bar here, the Slim ribbon, it's not confirmed negative. If we get another bar negative, that would confirm it. And what that then tells us is that there's a warning that is happening on the daily chart that there's a peak. So what I'm seeing is a peak warning driven by the information on the 2-hour momentum condition. In addition to that, I also overlaid here some smaller minor cycles. Now, these aren't perfect because they proportionately aren't in sync here. However, it just gives me a feel for the price action. And if I was looking at this low here that just occurred, today we just took out that low. So if this was a minor low, then this is another negative price action occurrence. So we had the combination of taking out this low from yesterday, that happened today, plus the negative combination between the Slim ribbon and the reversal scout. And if we get another bar of the Slim ribbon negative, that would secure that warning that there has been a peak occurring on, or has occurred, or is forming on that daily chart. And if that's the case, then what I'm looking for is a pullback into this support zone here. We have a 61.8 right around here, and I'm going to do a quick fib draw. And I'm going to use, the more granular you go in your time frames, it's easier then to see those swing high, swing low analysis play out. So I'm going to go off my 2-hour chart here because that's going to help me pinpoint inside of the daily chart. Let me just get my fib extension tool here. I see my swings pretty clearly. As long as this high holds here, this swing high, swing low analysis is valid. And what I would be looking for then is somewhere between, at a minimum, this 484. So we have a 50% right here. So in the middle of this short-term support zone, there's a 50%. So that would be really the first area to watch. So I would look at this 486 to 484, watch for some support there, then move my arrow down. And these arrows here, in terms of our tracks, our projection tracks, this is a new style that we're bringing in, are meant to indicate when we have projections that are in play in terms of the price action. And then when we have momentum to confirm, well, obviously we can't do this in real time. It's more for a teaching effect. So you think through the trade planning process, then we will change the colors on here. So for this one here, if that's the right one, I'm going to go, yeah. So I'm turning this one red because we have this combination of negative momentum here. And then I'm going to pull this one down, match it up with that. So if I'm doing my trade planning, I'm watching for a move into this area right around here, 420, 484 and a quarter. And then also now I'm going to pull it. So there's a confluence. I'm always looking for a confluence when it comes to these levels. That helps me get a feel for where the buyers and the sellers are going to be active and where the reactions can happen. So you can see here that right around this 480 to 479, 478 and a half area, we have a confluence with a 78.6 extension along with the short-term 61.8, which is a retracement coming from the cycle low here. So our swing low here up to the peak. And then you can see here that we have that 61.8. So this is the zone here that I would consider to be in play in terms of meaningful support. What we don't want to see if you're a short-term bull is a close below that 61.8, because that would start to open up the door to more risk. And then also obviously a break and close below that 78.6. Those would be warnings that something is changing. So this is now how that short-term affects the longer term. So we saw here that the 2 hours affecting the decisions over on the daily. And then we have to wait and see how this low forms on the daily to say anything about the weekly. So to make any new projections on the weekly, given the current timing that's happening on the daily, we really have to let this play out. The only thing that would change that is if there was all of a sudden a significant move that took out the 78.6 the other way. That could tell us maybe there was an early low that formed. Then that would suggest that we have a new intermediate impulse wave that could be underway to get higher, or new daily impulse wave that could get higher, maybe get further up into this intermediate projection zone, fib extension zone confluence. You can see that here on the intermediate time frame that we got up into there, and that triggered this reaction. So moving on to the weekly here, a close below this 61.8, that would then suggest that we likely have that peak over here on the monthly chart. You can see the monthly very strong, but we're watching to see how this daily cycle plays out in combination with the weekly to tell us if we've reached that monthly peak. If we have, then we'll probably see a pullback at least to that long-term 23.6. We want to make sure that this low here holds, because if that can hold, then there's a high probability we get into this next confluence. So really can't say much about the weekly and the monthly outside of the fact that these are still very positive patterns. But in terms of what's in play, these are the levels in play. However, the price action at the moment, given the daily and the 2 hour, is saying that we have to be a little bit more patient before we might re-engage with the opportunities there on the long side, as we're now into the likely this declining corrective phase on the daily. So that's the look at Berkshire Hathaway. Hope that was helpful in terms of seeing the process. Hope our overall analysis that we shared with you today as part of this Q&A segment with the members requesting these symbols is helpful, so that you can see the process that we go to as analysts and then to translate that information for trade planning purposes.